thank you for joining us today. My name is Becca Alexander, and I'll be facilitating this room for the remainder of the day. Today's topic is on the cusp of Agile governance, and it'll be presented by Greg Saunders. Greg is a PMP working at the Army and Air Force Exchange Service, also called the Exchange, which is an $8 billion retailer serving America's soldiers, airmen, and retirees. He's currently the lead for the Exchange's largest program and an architect for the transformation of the Exchange's program management approach. Previously at the Exchange, he served as the portfolio manager of 51 primary HR, payroll, and data warehouse systems, and the PMO head for a 16-person team managing a $150 million portfolio of 60 projects. As a manager, he ran a $2.5 million a year business in a top-tier consultant firm. And as a reserve United States Air Force colonel, thank you, he reestablished the Air Force Reserve Personnel Center, PMO, led the upgrade of their portion of the Air Force Personnel Center's call center, supporting over 2 million reservists, retirees, and their surviving spouses. And at the Pentagon, served as both U.S. Air Force Reserve's controller and reservist to the Air Force CIO Director for Cyberspace Capabilities and Compliance. Over his 30-year career, he's also become a certified Scrum Master, been certified in ITIL Foundation, and been certified by the Air Force as a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Help me welcome Greg Saunders.
Well, thank you for coming today. We're going to get into the cusp for being into Agile governance. That's a real goal of presenting today. Before we start, though, I'll point out, I bet everyone in the room has a phone. You're registering right now. But to give you a little feel of what Agile governance feels like, does anybody know the tagline from TV ads or from newspapers or magazines that says, "Don't mess with my discount"? And it's an app that you put on your phone, and it tracks your driving, harsh stopping. If you touched your phone, if you talked on your phone, that's a bad, bad one. And as Scott had said earlier this morning, it is set up to motivate you to do good, safe driving habits. So I don't pick up the phone unless it's my wife, okay? I don't touch it to do my navigation. I do it before I get in the car, because that makes me a better driver. Now, the incentive for me is every 90 days, I get a score, and I always beat my daughter. She's 19 years old. And I get a discount of up to 20%. Pretty nice incentive for doing it. And this thing works great. Now, some of the things are, it governs how I behave because of that, right? Now, it's also set up to work below 9,000 feet above sea level on roads with stop lines and stoplights. That's how it's set up to run. It expects me to be on a road, come to a stoplight or stop sign, stop, turn right, they have the map, they know exactly where I'm going. Well, this past President's Day, my family and I went skiing in Breckenridge. And I had my phone in my pocket. And I skied for a good 3 hours. And if it's steep, if it's fast, if it has jumps and bumps, I'm on it. And I have a lot of fun on that. Now, I've been through ski school as a little kid. I've skied with friends for years. I keep my gear all current. I pay my fees to get on the lifts. I'm all certified, ready to go. About 3 hours into it, 10 rides later, I pulled out my phone in a safe place where I wasn't going to drop it off the lift and lose my $1,000 device. I got all these notifications, and that's really strange for me because I just normally don't accept notifications. It's safe driver app. Are you okay? Safe driver app. Have you been in an accident? Safe driver app. Something's wrong with our app. Safe driver app. Would you please reboot your app? Safe driver app. We've rebooted your app for you. Safe driver app. Please restart your phone. There's something wrong with our phone, with our app. Now, they expected me to be on a standard road in their map, going to their stop signs and stoplights, right? But I was creating value for me in a completely different area that shouldn't have been governed by them. That's the difference between waterfall, traditional governance, and agile governance. Okay, both produce an end product that we need, that we want, that adds value, that we enjoy launching. But one is governed one way, another is governed another way. who defines the value? The customer, right? So, by the way, by Wednesday, they had fixed it and it was not giving me alerts anymore. So I don't know how that happened, but I was glad I wasn't getting bombed on this stuff all the time. So that's a quick intro to Agile governance and the challenges, some of the challenges you will face as you do it. So in good PM practice, we're going to get through 4 goals. I'm also telling you what's out of scope today. So number 1, we're going to go through what PMI gives us as tools for migrating to Agile governance. And as Scott hinted at some of them in that kickoff session this morning. Number 2, we're going to go through the process of launching Agile governance. Now, these first 2, by the way, are not going to be earth-shattering, revelatory to you. You're going to go, well, of course, and yes, and I read that in PMI too, and I've done these kind of things with my family, churches, everything else, and that's okay. I'm just walking you through a preliminary process that you can use as a model if you want to follow down this process. Number 3, I'm going to give you an Agile model of Agile governance today that may serve as a launching point or something that you can adapt to your company. And then number 4, I'm going to give you an example of what we did with that in 2021. What is out of scope of this is, if you have the expectation you're going to walk out with something that you can take out like a thumb drive and plug it into your company, you're going to be disappointed. And we're going to get into the details of why that is. You have to know your culture. So any questions before we get going on these 4 goals? Very well. So, again, not earth-shattering here. You're going to see at the top 2 items are going to be things right out of the PMBOK. A stakeholder analysis, a communication plan. Now, we have 10 knowledge areas. These are 2 that we primarily focus on when we launch, at least in our area, the Agile governance. The bottom 2 come out of PMBOK 7, the first one being the PMO video. Scott gave us a much more detailed information on that than I'm going to get into, or that this is even going to be aimed at doing. And then the disciplined Agile, of course, is what we use. Now, we looked into large-scale Scrum. We looked into Scrum Bond. We looked into scalable Agile framework. That last one, also known as SAFE, does work if you have no processes in place. Oh, I did forget to say on the title chart, I am a DoD civilian, and the views represented in this presentation are mine, and not necessarily those of the DoD or its components. I forgot that stuff. Sorry. Anyhow, that's stakeholder analysis. All right. So you need to do all 12 of the knowledge areas to do it. This is when you launch governance. It is a project, right? It has. I have a goal. I have a start and a stop. I have exit criteria to tell me whether or not I launch. So, stakeholder analysis. Main things you're looking for. Who are my proponents? Who are my neutral people? Who are my detractors? Proponents, I want to turn them into advocates. Will they go speak and advocate for this project that we're doing? Neutrals, I want to convert, if possible, to proponents and maybe even to advocates. Detractors, my best goal would be convert them to neutral. If not, risk planning, risk mitigating, you need to know what they're thinking so that you can have advocates speak against them or, counter their messages, and you need to be ready to do that as well. Comp plan. What do you do with a comp plan? You build up your proponents, you try to convert your neutrals into proponents, and you risk mitigate your detractors. Now let me give you an example of a really nice stakeholder analysis in comp plan. That was a good comp plan, executed very poorly, and had horrible results. So back in 1999, my company, a Big 8 consulting firm at the time, bid on a pre-ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, proposal for the Aeronautical Systems Center at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That place is the place that develops all of our airplanes. Been down to Fort Worth. I used to be on the team that managed the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II that flies out of here every so many days. And so they birth all those aircraft, you want to say that, and develop it. They've got about 11,000 people and a $6 billion budget. Back then, we didn't have all these cool tools to manage everything, and they wanted something that would manage cost and schedule, kind of the 2 of our triangle things, right? And so we magically named it Cost and Schedule Management Information System, shortly known as CASMIS. So our biggest proponent and sponsor was the CFO. You got to have that person. And a colleague of mine, Stefan, worked with the CFO. And as you know, every project has its problem or problems. And we found ourselves in the bad situation where our sponsor slash proponent became our biggest detractor. Didn't have my P&P at the time, but I had a good boss who said, Greg, your client is the CIO. Stefan, your client is the CFO. Get your rears in here and figure out how to make that CIO an advocate for our system. We're going to lose millions if you don't do this. So Stefan and I got together. We got a demo up, had it all ready, rehearsed it a few times. And the day of the demo, I got on the CIO's calendar. Day of the demo, I swung by Stefan's office, client site, checked in. Hey, everything running right? Yes. Okay. And I need to be careful of from what we demoed, because if something's not working today, I don't want to demo it to our supposed proponent. He goes, no, everything's fair. Anything I need to avoid? No, go ahead. So I grabbed lunch, got there at 1:45. So good plan so far. We have the plan, we've done our stakeholder analysis, checked in to make sure everything's there, show up 1:45, get in the office. I have him all by myself in his office. Very nice setting to do this. And Doug knows me pretty well. He's my direct client, and I'd say, this is going to show you your cost. You can dig in and drill down, see what you're spending. It's going to show you your schedules on your projects. You can see what's late. And they're executive levels, so they make really good sense for the CIO. So I had the dishonor and the horror of standing at his computer with him, and he logged in just fine. He said, okay, well, click on the scheduling module. It didn't come up. So I took about 15 seconds. I said, well, if it were here, we'd have all those nice things that I talked about. Hey, there's probably something wrong with that. Why don't you go to the cost module? Because you can see graphs and all this stuff. So he clicked back in, was trying to explain all the whiz-bang things you would see, and at that time I thought, this is just a losing proposition. I was professionally embarrassed for my company, excused myself, told him I'd come back and demo it when we figured out what was wrong. So I run out to my car, I call up Stefan. Stefan, it's 10 after 1. My demo's already done. He goes, did you demo at 1? Well, yes, that's why I checked in with you this morning. We had unscheduled maintenance we did at 12:50. Said, Stefan, why didn't you call me? You knew I had the demo. We just lost this guy's potential proponent. 6 months later, we were canceled. My partner took a 7-figure loss. I remember the day 3 years later when he pulled Stefan and me and said, hey, I'm not going to say the word. I finally made the money back that you lost me. I was only involved in it for 3 weeks, but I took some of the blame. Stakeholder analysis, very important. Comm plan, very important. Will help you to get success, won't guarantee it. All right, down to the stakeholder analysis comm plan. VDO, PMO, Scott did a really nice job on that. Helps you figure out what your environment is. Discipline Agile. If you are a PMI member, you know that you can log on and download the PMBOK 7, brand new, free, right? The whole thing. We used to pay $70, $50 for those things. It's not on your wall, it's searchable, that's kind of nice. And you can download the hundreds of tools that are Discipline Agile that Scott mentioned earlier today. They're there for your using. You're going to hear a Discipline Agile approach to this simply because there's some of my colleagues are in the office, but we have DoD policy we have to deal with, we have DoD regulations we have to deal with, we have Air Force policy and Army policy that we have to deal with. We have policies that you don't even want to know about. So to put a safe-based process in that has all this structure and all these new roles, there was no way. Our internal process, 5 stages, 4 gates, about 60 artifacts. We were not going to introduce something new. What was nice about Disciplined Agile is we could take what fit our culture. All right, so on here, again, nothing earth-shattering here, just 4 earth-shattering here, 4 steps to doing it. Assess your environment. I went into the stakeholder analysis to a degree, some cons of how a comp plan can go improperly. Your project approach, your certifications, you got to have people that are Scrum certified or ACP or DASM, those kind of things. You have to have some kind of governance in place, and you need to know your culture. How much delegation does this office take? How much will they trust people with? What are their tolerances for out of scope or out of schedule, etc. Now, based on all that, you tailor that approach. There is some governance stuff in here, or you can use this one that I'm going to share in a little bit and tailor it to your office or to your situation. So you got to have an understanding of Agile. You've got to have support of Agile in the company and know what that is and how much there is. Mention tolerance of delegation, and then am I strictly going to go all of a sudden to Agile, or am I going to go hybrid, or am I going to go with waterfall and then try to introduce a hybrid? All those things you need to do so you can transition. Then, as is a principle of Agile and is also a definition of a story, the T in invest is testable, right? Well, as I mentioned, launching governance is a project. And when we launch anything in Agile or anywhere else, we test first, right? You certainly don't launch something customer facing that you haven't tested. I tried with Stefan to test to make sure that the demo was going to go. All right, so there are ways to test that you can do even though it's just an idea or a concept. You can talk to your fellow PMO members. I run the PMO, or I serve as the lead of the PMO in my office, and so guess who was one of my first people I asked to do this, first group of people I asked to do? I got their feedback. They touch a lot of our business unit SVPs and EVPs to give feedback. Also talk to my boss. She's got access to different people than I do, different opinions. She gave me feedback. Talk to her boss, SVP. He gave me some opinion on it. Also went, if you have access to your local PMI chapter, I floated it by a think tank at our PMI chapter. You have these things available to you. Go ahead and do your homework because it'll help you have a better chance of success. It will not guarantee it. My company happens to have relationships with Forrester and Gartner, and they will sit down with you for a half hour. You send it out ahead of time, they'll read it, and they'll consult with you for a half hour. We adapted some of their things into the approach as well. And I hit all these other things that you can work through, and eventually, if you have access to some C-level through a sponsor or a mentor, I would run it by him or her. If you don't, you've got the best you can do. So now at this point, you've hopefully identified primarily your proponents, some of your detractors, and you refine that approach in conflict. Finally, we go to launch. Now, you would love to have the CEO. Not everybody gets the CEO as your sponsor, but that is always your target. But don't rest your laurels on that. You gotta have your artifacts in place. Remember, you can log on to PMI and get some of those artifacts. A training plan, which is part of your personnel plan over there for all these levels to communicate so they're ready to do it and ready to go. Put it in place, learn fast, fail fast, adjust. That's what Agile is. Why not launch the same way, right? Okay, so now we're going to go through a model of Agile governance, and there's 7 components here that I'm going to walk you through. Everything from our waterfall traditional one that I helped build way back in 2010. We still run it, and that's primarily where most of our projects run. Test for Agile projects, again, test first. By the way, the first principle of Lean is deliver fast. When you get into how to do that, you limit demand to what capacity you have. We have, by no means have perfected that. We get more demand than we have, but you have to have something to limit it. Some governing force, just so they can't just all say, I want to be Agile. There's more discussion on that in the paper. We'll go to a Agile, hybrid, the Agile overall, where we'll spend the majority of our time, then a structure of how to make the decisions, and then an oversight responsibilities, because that's one of the layers that you have to do, is you have to tell people what their jobs are. And then finally, a governance approach, which is part of our comm plan. So some of these things you can even adapt. If you're trying to launch this, you can take it and use some of these tools and adapt them to your culture. So now, I don't know if everybody in here is a PMP or not, but I think you can rattle off the stages, the activities of project management. You initiate, you plan, you execute, you manage control while you execute, and then you close. Pretty dry stuff, isn't it? If I get somebody new on my team, or I'm talking to a C-level individual, and they go, per PM, what is it? I found this over the years, this helps them understand. I tie it to emotions. And tell me if this hasn't happened to you. So initiate, that's the dreaming stage. Walking down the hall someday, minding my own business, going to my next meeting. Ms. SVP goes, Greg, come in here. Yes, ma'am, what would you like? I have this idea. It's going to put $500,000 of gross margin every quarter to our company. It's probably only cost about like $2 million. So you know it's got a good return on value. And we need to have it in place prior to peak season, because that's when all the money comes in. And then they'll normally lean and whisper, by the way, if you do really well, there's probably a promotion here for you. Now, what typically happens, and projects don't always go that well, and I'm left hanging, holding the bag and blame for it. But that's the dreaming. From dreaming, which was initiate, you go to planning. Now the PM runs off and goes, well, it seems like, so I dream and I see, and I go talk to my IT colleagues, I talk to some VPs, talk to people who've done it before, and I come back to Ms. SVP and I go, well, ma'am, it seems like this idea, and by the way, I think there's a lot of merit in here. I have to remain independent, but it does seem to have a lot of merit. But it seems like, after I've talked to everybody, that it's going to be more close to like $4 million in about 18 months. Oh, that's great, Greg. You have till peak selling season, you get your $500,000. But just go get it done. So off we go, right? Everybody's had this happen to you. Now we've gone from dream to scene, and we get into execute. Now, I'm no idiot, and I don't like to be in trouble, so I go in from dream to scene, I start to scheme. I make all these deals with the IT people to move all my tasks first, and we do this, and that's at the cost of other projects. So I've dreamed, I've figured out to scene, now I'm scheming, because what happens in management control is I get reamed and I get screamed at. Right? And it's uncomfortable, you have to have thick skin, you get used to it, you have your exit phrases, all that stuff. But so I've gone from a dream to what it seems to be time scheming, and now I'm getting reamed and schemed. And then that last activity was, close, which I don't have a rhyme, it's forget. Right? Everybody on the team wants to go to the next dream. They run off, what do? We have to do all the administrative closing, the books, which is required by GAAP, and it's good work, and we're professionals, we go do it, but they get to go do the next cool stuff before we do. But if you work with C-level or whatever level, if you tie it to these emotions, they go, oh, so that's what that feels like, and they get a little better understanding, I find, of what project management is. Now, into our model. So first of all, this is our 4-stage. My VP used to say, well, so really, our executive committee gets 4 bites at the apple. Yes, you do. And there are 5 stages that you go through. These are the roads and the stop signs that I talked about, and then when I went skiing, it caused a whole bunch of problems. The big deal on here is our company, what we did is we didn't add these to emotions, we said, what's the deliverable of each stage? So the getting started is why? What's my business motivation of doing this? What's your problem statement? What's your business case analysis? Et cetera, et cetera. What's it going to add to the bottom line? We do that, we come to the executive board, we make our pitch. If we get the go-ahead, they say, okay, now go tell us in detail, write a business requirements document, and tell us what you're going to do. All done up ahead. We come back and we say, hey, we really figured it out. The cost changed a little bit, the schedule's a little longer, but we think we should still go, and they approve us for gate 2. And in acquisition, we figure out the best way. Are you going to outsource this? Are you going to insource it? Are you going to offshore it? It's going to be hybrid. You guys know all the trade-offs. And so they come back and they say, well, now you can have your money to go award and bring a contractor on and do discovery with them and planning and figure out how. The 12 knowledge areas of project management, the whole schedule. Remember, when you're talking to your business use and everything, when they hear the word plan, what one word do they think of? A schedule. A plan, I hope you learn this, is 12 components. You're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble if you bring back a schedule, don't have a comp plan, don't have a personnel plan, don't have cost, et cetera, et cetera. So preaching to the choir. Now, Scott was kidding around this morning that the center of the world revolves around you and everything. Every time he asked, is it the engineers, is it the finance people, is it the PMO, I said finance. Because you have to hit a bottom line. The risk of a stage-based waterfall traditional thing is, it's not until way over here that you have one large, close to all to nothing proposition. Has anybody canceled a project? What, and if it was a capital expenditure, what was the accounting office thinking they were going to do with that capital expenditure? They were going to depreciate it over the lifespan of that feature or building or whatever you built, right? What happens when you cancel a project? You take a write-off that year. Who is reaming and screaming at you at that point? Okay? So there is risk in here, not only to you and your reputation and keeping the team motivated and all this stuff for months, if not years in some cases, you're also putting the company at risk. So that's one of the reasons we are migrating to Agile. Now, I mentioned the first principle of Agile is deliver fast, and the means of doing that is limiting demand to what your capacity is. I don't have a secret handshake for that or anything. It doesn't work perfectly, but we came up with 4 criteria. Right out of the PMBOK, the minimal benefit increment used to be referred to as the MVP, minimally viable product. It really has the same purpose. All we've done is put a business bent on it. So my degree's in economics, I only talked about it once, but I know my daughter even hates microeconomics. Like, how could that be? What did you learn in microeconomics? Marginal benefit must exceed or be equal to marginal cost, right? That's all this is. That's all this is. When you do something, you need to have a tie to the market that they're going to use it and pay you enough money to make it worth to cover the costs, right? Once that breaks and the cost starts outweighing the benefit, you stop the project. But in Agile, you can do that because you've launched some functionality already. It's not a write-off. And we're going to get into that in the process. So, minimal business increment. You have benefit increment, excuse me. You have to be able to prove that you have something that the market needs and wants, and immediately. Next thing, flexible for market-driven requirements. This isn't something you can wait 6, 10, 18 months for. You have to be tied into the market. You have to be able to have knowledge of what's going on there and a team that can respond to that, right? That's what your Scrum Master does. Next thing on there, realize value within 4 to 6 months. We'd like it to be shorter, but that's what it is. Post-implementation review at that point, did you really do it? If you aren't providing it and that market isn't taking what you're selling, take those resources, put them somewhere else. This is not normally how PMs think. This is not normally how product owners. It's my little baby, I want to grow up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, that's not how it should be done. It's not a child. It's not your personal thing. It's a business investment. Next one down there, the infrastructure in place. Now, with cloud solutions, this is getting a little grayer because you can turn things on and off. And you can have it so people can get into Agile a little faster. But a lot of time there's configuration of that thing. And if you hear them saying that they're going to configure something, it's going to take 3 or 4 months, we don't let them, you don't get to come into Agile yet. You can, as the footnote says, you can start one and end a different way once you qualify, or you can have different components coming in, but you have to have your infrastructure in. This is all to limit demand so that we can put these assets where they're most valuable. So criteria might be adaptable to your office, or at least a starting point. Now here's our Agile. By the way, you know, the big term now is we say traditional waterfall. We don't say waterfall, and we say traditional, not waterfall. Put tradition and Agile together and go try to coin that phrase and sell something. You don't want to be selling Tragile. All right, so here's what we did. We've converted it down. You notice we used to have 4 gates. Now we have 3 gates. 1 went away. We know the why, the what, and the best. The executive committee gets to say that, but look, the Scrum and the team and the the project steering committee get to approve sprints based on value. Wow. They get to do the minimal benefit increment releases. Wow, something we hadn't done before, but it's what we implemented. Now, I will tell you that officially, our company policy doesn't have this. It's not documented anywhere. But because we're allowed to condense gates, we can implement. You do first, then you document later, right? Don't document and then don't stop code for documentation, another principle of Agile. So eliminated one gate, and it gives a lot of power down to this project steering committee. And by the way, one of the things that VP that I talked about before, he said, hey, every time you come and ask for an Agile project, I feel like I'm writing a blank check. So that was some feedback in the stakeholder analysis. Well, how do we do that? We have this value check in here, which controls time and money. You exhaust, well, let's go back to how normal PM works, or the waterfall. In normal PM, you have the iron triangle. You have scope, you have schedule, you have cost. In the middle, it's quality, right? And that quality is supposed to get you value by selling something. In the Agile world, this is on purpose, a smaller diagram. We have the iron V. You have schedule, and you have cost. And in the center is your value. And as long as your customer is buying your value, you keep extending schedule, and you keep extending cost. The value checks, the way they work for us is, they give them out in increments, and you have to come back and earn it. Like Scott said in his keynote, he hands his money to daughter, but he does a value check. Are you buying cigarettes? And he was kidding about that stuff. And he's not going to hand out money anymore. Is the market buying what you're selling? Are you adding to our bottom line? Okay, great. We will give you more schedule and more cost to spend. And by the way, every level, from product owner to projects to sponsor to project steering committee to the executive committees, have to ask, does it add value? If it doesn't, turn it off, put those resources somewhere else. You hear a lot of emphasis on that on my behalf in here. I won't say that the company is always open to that, neither is the sponsor or the product owner, but that really is what we're supposed to do. We bring value delivery office. Does the market want it? Keep adding to it. Does the market not want it? Stop it, find out what the market wants. Here's our full Agile process. If you've noticed, what started as 4 gates is now 1. The why, the ESC, product owner, etc., can figure out the how and why through backlog, moving story. You know, you do your visioning, you do your storyboard, you do your themes, you do your epics, you do your stories, etc., and you work through it. But all that freedom, all that decision has been delegated to this area, to this level. It's wonderful. Who feels more important now? The team, right? And they also have the value of being tied in to talking to the product owner or the VP or whoever the sponsor is at the sprint release and at the retrospectives and such. They find out what the customer is responding to. Did anybody here start in IT just by chance? Okay, did any of you like sitting at your screen and going to the coffee and get coffee every once in a while and just get yelled at for being slow, or that the customer didn't like it? Didn't that happen once in a while? You didn't like it. Well, what is the difference between here? The real essence of Agile is not the artifacts, it's not the process, it's not the principles, it's not the domain. The real essence of Agile is that the person most closely related to the customer talks to the people who are delivering what the customer is taking. So this person gets some understanding and respect, another principle of Agile, of what these people go through to do it. And these people go, wow, some guy coded something, and then 3 weeks later I unit tested it, and then I integration tested, new user testing, and 3 months later it went live, and then they hated it. It's, wow, a month later I find out somebody liked it or didn't, and I changed it. So this team feels better, right? This guy or lady has a better understanding of what's going on. That's the essence of Agile. It's not the artifacts, it's not the principles, it's not the domains, it's not that stuff. It is that communication, right? Common plans. All right, so look at the benefit here too of Agile. Hybrid did this too, but in the first process that I showed you, when did you get your value? Way out here. When do you get your value? Now. You put a couple sprints together or release, you're starting to add value to the bottom line. You're evaluating. What happens if the market doesn't want my product anymore? Here. Well, I've got 8 or 9 releases that are depreciable over the lifespan of those releases that are still producing money for me, and it wasn't a total loss. That's a financial benefit to the company. It also doesn't make the team want to go run away from the project when it's done and only deliver 70% of its scope. There's a reason. The market no longer wanted what we were doing here. We need to take these great resources and put it on this objective over here. So there are benefits for team dynamics on this thing. There are benefits for decisions. There are financial benefits. But that was the essence of Agile, what we talked about a little bit. And also what it does for the company. Now, I talked about stakeholder analysis a lot, and before we went and launched this thing and started using it, our company, I mentioned, I helped with the original process back in 2011. We had not done any Agile, and we finally did it around 2017 and stuff. And quite frankly, you know, the people on the team, we didn't have Scrum Master certified anyway, and they really didn't know a sprint from a hop, jump, or leap, right? We just, you know, hey, I'm gonna go on a sprint down the hall. That was a euphemism for going to the restroom, right? But everything was a sprint because we're doing Agile now. So here we go ahead and launch that, and everybody touted that this did well because we hit the schedule, and as far as the executives knew, it was like, wow, we put Agile in place, and wow, it worked really well. They forgot the fact that they were having regular meetings with the IT people to figure out what the market demanded. So it's, you know, what the boss inspects is what the people do. And so that communication, the IT folks felt more valuable, these guys were more plugged in, etc. So that's what happens. Well, this one had already gone, we're a little more mature in sprints, everybody wants Agile, again, made those filters so everybody couldn't just hop in and say, well, I want Agile. Well, you're not ready for Agile. What I did is I went down to the guy in IT that was still running the project. He wasn't the Scrum Master, he was the head of the IT division that does it. And he's a good colleague of mine. I said, Scott, hey, I need some feedback on this Agile model we're considering launching, because it would be really detrimental for me to launch this and you to stand up and say, our Agile project would not work under this governance. He goes, yeah, that would be bad. So we spent about an hour in a conversation going through it, and he's looking at it, and he goes, yeah, and by the end of the hour, he had concluded, yeah, it would work, and you have no risk from us of standing up and saying otherwise. So during the conversations, we were talking about, you know, scoring user stories and stuff. And we talked about playing poker, and I remember I was taking some notes down and stuff. He goes, great. What, Scott? He goes, do you remember when you were in IT? I said, well, of course, and we were only a couple offices apart. He goes, do you remember how we despised the business unit when they would come down and say, you guys are slow. You guys don't get the stuff done. You don't deliver the right thing. When you do deliver something, it's bad. And I hated that. I go, well, yeah, I didn't like it either. It was kind of a bummer. He goes, well, I had always had it as a personal goal to beat that, to overcome that somehow. And he goes, and you know what? With Agile, I've done it. Just a few weeks ago, my business unit came to me. I'm on a 3-week cycle. They said, we need you to slow down. He said, he had this big smile. It was like he was just holding his firstborn baby son or daughter. And he was so proud. Job well done, all based on Agile principles. Now, this made him feel good about it, and they finally stabilized the sprint and all that stuff to meet both parties. But it does help the esteem and the quality of life of everybody. That's one of the principles of Agile, is we live a standard life, right? We don't kill ourselves. So that is one of the tests that I did, and you should be going through your company to figure out input that you can get. So let's take a look at the governance structure. No big surprises here. We are a government office, so we have an APHES board, the Army Air Force Exchange Service, headed by a 3-star Air Force or 3-star Army General, which is the head of their personnel, because what our dividend does is it goes back to promote welfare and recreation back to the services, so that these guys can have a decent life when they're not in service, and recreating over the weekends, and their families too. Below that, we have this investment committee and an evaluation committee. These are E and SVPs in the company. It's 2 different levels. One group does they have some delegated authority at the evaluation committee, and then things that they don't have the authority to do, they make recommendations to the investment committee. but that's another way that we control it. And my colleagues in here who do the RE projects, which are construction, they fall into the same structure at the top, but they have a different process. Again, back to what Scott said, you have to have different processes for your different business lines. You don't follow the same governance that we follow. So on here, I'll start with the Agile side. I don't think there's any surprises on here. Project Steering Committee, composed of a sponsor, a whole bunch of E and SVPs, usually have an active sponsor at the IT level, somebody from FA that tells us if you're really getting value out of it. They have 2 or 3 other VPs to give perspectives of other things. And then, this is not unique to us. A project team has an owner, a project manager, scrum master, and a team. Everybody knows that. On our waterfall train, we can have 2, and it's just decided by how big the project is. If it's big enough or complex enough, we'll put a steering committee on it. The only difference between here and here is there's no scrum master. And the only difference here and here is the sponsor has the authority delegated to him or her. So again, you can set yours up however you want. This is just how ours happens to be set up. I want to share it with you because it's a component you need to have for governance. This, it looks like an eyesore, and it may be a little bit of an eyesore, but let me tell you how much peace and lets people sleep when you read this thing. Okay, there's 4 pieces of bold text up here. Everything else on there, other than the Agile responsibility column, we were doing already. It's in our exchange operating procedures. Everybody knew it. It's lore. It's written on the bathroom walls, on and on and on and on. What's new and what we had to do is, remember that schedule and cost extension and the authorities? Well, guess what we have to get the committees to do? They need to set this value check as to when does a project need to come in. Something new to them, not a big deal, but we say, hey, you're granted 500,000, 6 months, whatever your size of your company is, make it appropriate. The other one we had to do is we said, for the last 15 years, if we wanted to go live, we had to do this big formal presentation to you guys and tell you all the pros and cons and stuff. Agile is not going to let that happen because we go live like every 3 or 4 weeks, and you guys are much too important to pull into a room that frequently. So like, well, we don't want to meet any extra meetings. We said, okay, well, how about we have these project steering committees? Oh yeah, we know about those. Why don't you let us have them, and could you delegate authority to them that they could decide if it could go live? We'll use the same checklist, but would you please delegate it? Oh yeah, we'll let you do that. So that's the example you're going to see. That's how that one works. We no longer have to go up to this big formal presentation. Don't get me wrong, we will still through all the rigor that we have to do. It's just at a lower level to increase speed, right? All right. The other one we do is, that the Project Steering Committee did is, that's the go live, the actual go live. So this was the value, I said that wrong, I was talking about the go live over here. The value over here is that used to have to go up all the way for the one-time big shot up to the executive committee to say this is the value we're going to bring. Well, now we look at each little sprint. Is the sprint added value? Is the next sprint added value? Is the next sprint added value? That's what the project steering is. The last thing that happens is the product owner, which is right out of the PMI. The product owner sets the scope for the sprints, right? I cannot convene the executive committee and say, hi, we would like to do 45 points of work this month. The composition of these 45 points of work are 4 major features and 1 minor feature. Do you have time to listen? And the value of this is this. And it's only $50,000. They're like, why are you talking to us about $50,000? So use that example. They're willing to let this go. Now, we have the value checks, don't get me wrong, so they look to see whether or not we're doing it. So all that happens, but the way you read this, here are the people who make the decisions with delegated authority. Here are the responsibilities and authorities, and to whom they're accountable, so that's on the thing. So let's say we're having an evaluation committee, and they say, hey, we haven't been seeing the go lives on that project you've been doing over there. Well, what do? We say, we pull this thing up. We say, oh, hey, do we need to have a discussion? Is there something going on that we need to take authority away from the steering committee? Because you were talking about that project, it's Agile. So that gives the project steering committee the peace of mind that they have the authority to make the decision. An auditor can't come by and say you extended your authority, you usurped something, it's there. And this is a great communication tool not only to educate and train, but also to control the session. If they're getting out of scope, you go up and say, wait a second, we all agreed to this, the secretary will do that. Do we need to change something? Because if we do, this is a major one. Because we cannot run Agile, if you're gonna pull that up to here, we have to come to you, because we have to convene you every 3 weeks for every project. We have 3 projects that are running Agile. Oh, we don't wanna do that. Okay, so this is part of your comp plan, and it is part of your structure for doing it. May or may not be adaptable to your office. Could be a starting point. Part of our comp plan too is, remember my boss said, we're writing a blank check when you come and ask for these things. So what do you think our top line thing on this is? Who controls the budget in Agile, Waterfall, or Agile? It's that executive committee. We did not take or ask any authority from them. Now, they delegated some money down, but the overall budget, they hand out in increments to get incremental benefit, right? Next one on here, am I still gonna get the scope, schedule, and cost? Well, yes, you are. In all instances, that's basic, PM, and as professionals, we're gonna do that with you. The rest of these two, you can evaluate them, seeing if you want them. Here's some of the, how you get the savings is through delegation. And then the 4 bites, 3 bites, or the 1 bite of the apple. And then we have a DoD governance rule that says if anything over $5 million, we have to go up to the BOD Board of Directors for it, so depending on. So this is another tool partly for education to assure them, as you do your stakeholder analysis, you could look at this, these maybe they don't all fit for you, but you can look at it and say, okay, well, we don't have a BOD, but we have this. We don't use gates. We've never done it. We're just launching it again. Well, then don't bring this one up. You know what I'm saying? Get it as open as you can with some kind of value checks in there. But you can adapt this for your own project and your own rollout. Then I want to walk you through an example of a roadmap. This is proprietary information, so I did have to hide it from you. But roadmaps come in all shapes and sizes. This is the one we happen to choose. You can see there's a bunch of features that are hidden from you, but they were there, and we did launch them. And we're very aware when peak selling season is. And you notice this little one down here. Open, available for things that get preempted, or I don't know if it's happening to you, but sometimes your sprints don't always go right, and some of your features get kicked to the next sprint, right? So away you go. That just gives us some extra capacity to do that, planned in. Now, here's our mobile community app back in 2021. This is notional. I'm not going to share with you our results. But I got to tell you what a mobile community app is. Our customers are airmen and soldiers, right? They go on bases. Bases have fences around them, have barbed wire, weapons, and everything on there. To get on a base like that right pat that I was talking about, 11,000 people, they're all trying to get in between 7 and 8:30. They have 6 gates. Think any of the gates ever have a problem? It's not like there's a helicopter flying around going, this is a news break, gate 4 is closed. You're just stuck on the line. So one of the things the app does is, if they have that logged in and they're running their Safe Driver app, so it's in a handheld thing and they aren't touching it, it will tell you what gates have problems, and it'll say, hey, maybe go over this gate. Something, wouldn't you like to know that? It's a little aid to give you that. Another thing it does is, I don't know who's been on bases and stuff, but if I were to drive through Richardson or Dallas or anything else, I could pick out a Lowe's about a half mile away, because there's a blue sign. And I could pick out a Home Depot, because it's an orange sign, right? And I could pick out a Kentucky Fried Chicken if I'm hungry, because it's a red thing with a white thing in the middle that kind of looks like a chicken, all right? So on a base, it's all uniform. Brick, brown brick or white brick buildings with little signs with little numbers that every year seem to get harder for me to read for some reason. They have a little sign outside, which is also harder for me to read every year, and it's just not big enough. And it's not like they have these big signs that are trying to draw you in. So the other thing we do is this app has on there availability of store hours, and whether or not they're open when you look. I mean, everybody else does this when the base do that. Only the base can't afford to do it, so we did it to them, for them, to help with their morale, welfare, and recreation. Our benefit, there's another little button on there that says, would you like to shop at our store? Click, and away they go, and that's sort of return on benefit for us. So in here, the value check goes, they have so much to exceed, they come in, they look at their sprint. Remember, these these are really indicated, I really shouldn't show the phones every one because a sprint doesn't necessarily, it's a minimal business increment, it isn't necessarily a release. That kind of implies it's release. But each release at least has a cost benefit analysis, some features the customer can use, it gets depreciated, gotta keep the FA people happy, finance people happy. It has some benefits or you ought not to have done it, and it has to do a post-implementation review. Made up numbers here, but here's an example of those things. What is ominously in the lower left-hand corner? Can anybody tell me, what does that say to you at the bottom? Not the sign, not the words. What is it? It's a stop sign, okay? PSC, product owner, EC or IC, they should always be wondering, when do we stop this project? When does the marginal benefit not exceed the marginal cost, right? So we're always reminding them, if you don't have a market for your thing, stop it. Other projects will offer more benefits and we'll take those resources over there. So let me just give you an example of this. It's not a live one that we did, but let's just take 3 sprints and an example of making a release. Sprint 1, you gotta have some kind of log on to register in a database to capture all their information. Sprint 2, go to the one base that you're gonna launch at. You can't do all, I don't even know how many bases there are anymore. You can't do all of them at once, and you get their information for their store hours, gate, that kind of stuff. Sprint 3, figure out how to make your web page that they can buy something on, render on that app and not look horribly ugly, right? So you can sell something. Combine 3 sprints together, you have a release, right? That's how we do it. So that is how we did it back in 2021. These are notional in here, always reminding them, stop when it no longer adds value. So in summary, the PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge and Disciplined Agile, via PMI, if you remember, it is covered by your membership. Use it, you're paying for it, your company's paying for it, you ought to be using it. One funny story I had from, I just earned my PMP and this fellow named Jay, careful so we don't get into your work streams, yep, got it. Could I come talk to you about it a little bit? So we talked for about 10 minutes and talked a little bit about SWOT analysis, stakeholder analysis. In about 10 minutes, I said, hey Jason, you've got a good start for your comp plan here. He goes, Greg, I need to stop this meeting. I said, what are you talking about? I'm not upset. He goes, I spent all that time learning my PMP and I'm not even using it. Let me go back, use some of the tools that they gave me, and we'll meet in a week after I've done some homework. Now, that's what we did. We met again, and we had a very fruitful meeting and did well with that client. Please do your homework. These tools are there. You've been trained on them. You've been tested on them. Use them. You didn't do it just to get a certification. You did it because they add value to your life and your profession and your workplace. Okay. Next thing. Check the fit to your company culture. Your stakeholder analysis. Are you agile ready? Some indicators that your company is not agile ready. Hey, Mrs. PM, come in here. I've heard this really cool thing about Agile and Sprint. It makes IT work faster. I'd like you to do it. Probably not Agile ready. Probably not Agile ready. Hey, Mr. PM, come on in here. I know these value delivery offices and would add value, and we got some ideas, and could you lead this thing? And I don't know what you're going to do. Just do it faster, do it better. Probably not Agile ready. Agile ready could be, hey, I've been hearing about Agile a lot. Could you come and have a session with me and teach me what it is and show what it is so I can get an understanding of it and tell me what the essence of it is that we talked about 15 minutes ago in the presentation. And if you can get that commitment from that individual and a few others that they're willing to survey the market and meet with those lowly IT people who are usually tucked away and show them how the market is using their value, they will succeed. And that is probably Agile ready. You won't necessarily get that perfect of a match, but you guys all have soft skills, discern it, figure it out, and launch it. If you don't have those things and you're being asked to do that, you're going to be in the scream and ream phase really fast. So protect yourself on that. Or if you're being forced to do it ask for a coach from outside. Agile offers them. Last thing is, I just offer this to you as something you can build on or adapt for your office. So with that, I'll open it for any questions. Yes?
I have a question about the project steering committee. It sounds like a really great idea in theory, but I know our organization is like very sensitive to just creating committee after committee after committee. How did you differentiate the membership of the investment committee versus the project steering committee? Anything different, but still independent?
Well, the investment committee and the executive committees are solely of E and SVP, so that's one differentiation. The project steering committees will usually have a sponsor who's often, but not always, an SVP or an EVP on it, and then it's full of VPs from different disciplines. Because as you're doing a project, you want to make sure, am I doing something that's going to kill the accountants? You know, my accounts receivable team, or accounts payable team is only so big. Are you doing something that's going to make their process horrendous and manual? Well, the VP for FA is going to say, you can't do that unless I get more people, or you give me a project that's going to help over here first. Does that help? Yes, over here.
So, oftentimes I see that the PM is the one who gets screened at the end
Right.
of a project. You see that, everything seems to have gone well, but with some bumps. But at the end of the day, you feel like, okay, you know what, we did deliver, and we did deliver value, the business is happy.
Yes.
And the development team is getting appreciated, the testing team is getting appreciated, everybody, but the PMO is screening the PM.
Okay. That's a shame. And that's tough, because all the applaud goes out there, they get to go to the next screen, you get,
Yes.
you're sweeping up like Carol Burnett, walking out, and kissing the guy asleep at the head in the desk. If you aren't old enough, go watch old Carol Burnett at the end of every show. So we are fortunate enough, blessed enough, if you want to call it, to have not only an EPMO that my boss runs, but then the PMO that I serve as the leader of that. And we make sure that every PM with every go live gets our formal award or thanks awards. So it's not thousands of dollars in every case, but it's a couple hundred at least, and they get recognition. They may have gotten beaten up out there, but in here we applaud them because we know the pain that it is to launch a project. So that's how we handle that. Others? Yes?
In the beginning, one or two slide, I think I saw a phrase called delegation tolerance. Can you elaborate on that?
Delegation tolerance, yes. All right, so you would think in a DOD military, and as Becca said, I retired as a colonel in the Air Force, there's a lot of authority, and there are certain things, if you usurp it, you can go to jail, or I can lock you up, or whatever. Some of that carries into us, and no one's gonna lock anybody up, but because we're military and DOD, you can imagine it's just a little more rigorous than other places. So a delegated authority is simply that there's one party that is still, if you know what a RACI chart is, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, right? All right, so you can't delegate accountability. President Truman, what's his sign say in front of his desk? The buck stops here, right? Okay, he could delegate responsibility and say, I'm gonna choke your throat, whatever, but he couldn't do that. But he had to make the decision that he would delegate. That's based on his relationship with the individual, based on their past history. If it's a team or a committee, you can go look at their past performance and see what they do. And those value checks that we talked about, that the IC and EC would go and hand out authority of cost and schedule, it's not the same for every team. It doesn't have to be. It's, hey, that PM's brand new. Ooh, we're not gonna give you $3 million. We're gonna give you $50,000 for your first one. All right, does that help? Okay.
It applies to every small organization too.
Oh, it does. Well, right. What I call the eye chart, if you don't have delegated authority, it's not written down, everybody runs around scared. Right? Well, if I do this, am I gonna get in trouble? If I do this, could I get fired? Right? So you have to have some of that codified so that people know, remember, it had responsibilities, authorities, and to whom you're accountable. That all has to be there because that gives people freedom to run around in. and we are out of time. So with that, thank you guys very much. All right, thank you, Becca.